Seventh graders, you need your 3.1B locating rational numbers on a number line notes out in front of you, a calculator, and a pencil. You may or may not use the calculator, but at least it's there to help you if you need it. So when we're locating, we're going to be looking to find where rational numbers would be located on this number line. So when we talk about locating, we're looking for, hey, if I have -1/8, where would that be approximately on the number line? That's what locating rational numbers on a number line is referring to. We did this if you were with us as a sixth grader. However, we just focused on our positive rational numbers. We would have to plot 1/8, locate it, and then plot it. This time, we are going to be working with positive and negative rational numbers, and we just have to locate, find where it would fall on the number line. Our goal for today is I can locate positive and negative rational numbers on a number line. So look at the first chunk in your notes. How do you divide a number line into fractional parts? That can be a challenging piece. So think, if I wanted to divide my first number line here in half, what does that mean? Well, that means the denominator of my fraction is a 2. I want to have 2 equal pieces. So if I need to get 2 equal pieces out of this whole, I need to cut it about right in the middle. Go ahead and do that on your number line that talks about dividing it in halves. You can see I have 1, 2. I have 2 halves, and those 2 halves make up my whole. What if I wanted to cut a number line up into fourths? Fourth is telling me that my denominator of my rational number is a 4, and I need 4 equal pieces. Halves and fourths are very closely related, right? Half of a half is a fourth. So if I want to cut this up into 4 equal pieces, I can put a line here and a line here, and you can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal pieces. So if I had defined 1/4, since I have 4 equal pieces, my first tick mark here would be the 1 out of the 4. So this would represent a quarter or a fourth. Halves and fourths are our benchmark fractions. They're our go-to fractions. We want to be able to see those very easily in a whole. Another benchmark fraction is thirds. So let's divide a number line up into thirds. Here's our number line. Thirds is telling me I want 3 equal pieces. So the denominator of my rational number is a 3. So I need to cut this whole up into 3 equal pieces. 1, 2, 3. There I have 3 equal pieces. So if I had to plot 2/3, here would be my 1/3, here would be my 2/3. If I had to locate 1/3, well, here would be my 1/3. What if I had to locate half? Well, we saw what half already looked like. That's where we need 2 equal pieces. So that would be about right there. So being able to see these benchmark fractions in a whole is really beneficial. Over on the left side of your notes, 7th graders, I want you to write this in that top chunk. Denominator tells how many equal pieces the whole is cut up into. Numerator tells what you have. And I modeled that as we illustrated these benchmark fractions on the number line. Pause the video and write this down on the left-hand side, reminding yourself that that denominator tells me how many equal pieces my whole is cut up into. The numerator is telling me how many pieces I have or where I need to go to locate it. Positive rational numbers. This is review. Locating, plotting positive rational numbers. We did this as 6th graders if you were with us at RMS. First thing, you got to make sense of the number line. Is it showing you just whole numbers? Is it showing you fractional pieces? Numbers go on for forever, so there's an infinite amount of numbers within 2 whole numbers on a number line. So looking at our first one here, we have 2, 3, 4, and 5. My whole, I can just find a whole here, and I'll pick any whole. I can go from 2 to 3, another whole would be from 3 to 4, another whole would be from 4 to 5. Look, is this whole right here cut up into pieces? Yeah, let's count those pieces. 1, 2. Some people like to count the tick marks, and that's fine. You just can't count this one. 1, 2. So that means I have 2 equal pieces. That's my denominator. And any fraction that has a denominator of 2, we know that is halves. Those are nice rational numbers to work with. So this right here represents 2 and 1/2. Don't forget your whole number. Or as a decimal, it looks like this. So recognizing both ways to show those rational numbers, in the fraction form or in the decimal form. So now, if I have to plot or locate 2 1/4 on this number line, first of all, this whole number 2 tells me to look right here. And now I need to plot a fourth. And if you think about a fourth, we know a fourth is half of a half. We practiced cutting a number line up into fourths in our first chunk in our notes. Or you could change this to a decimal and it would be 2.25. Well, if this is 2.5, we know 2.25 is going to come to the left of 2 1/2, or it's going to be a little to the right of 2. So there would be 2 1/4. And we're going to label it as point A. Looking at point B here, we need to find 7 1/2. And you might not be comfortable looking at the rational number like this. You might go, I would like to see what that is as a mixed number. I see it's an improper fraction. My numerator is greater than my denominator, so let's change that to a mixed number. How many times does 2 go into 7? 3. That's 6. 6 halves, right? How much more to get to 7 halves? 1/2. So 7 halves is the same as 3 1/2. And if you aren't comfortable looking at that, well, you could change it into a decimal too, just reminding you of that. But our number line is cut up into halves, right? So that means there is a specific tick mark for this value. Did you notice over here I did not put a tick mark? No, because then I would be changing what the whole is cut up into. So if there's not a tick mark present, we're giving an estimation, an approximation as to where that point is. So plotting 3 1/2, here's 3, and then I'm going to go halfway, and this will be point B. How are you doing on staying with me in your notes? Remember to pause the video if you need to. Next, we have 4 7/500ths. Now, you might go, gosh, this decimal is halves. I want to see halves, Mrs. Kluber. Well, if you change this to a fraction, 7/500ths is the same as, in simplified form, 3/4. Again, we want you to recognize those halves, those quarters, and those thirds. So 4 3/4. Well, here's 4. Here's 4 1/2, which we know our half is 0.5. So this would be 4.5. This is 4.75. So that means it's going to be greater than 4 1/2, right? 4 1/2 was that 4 5/10. I put it on there just to help me see this value is going to be greater than that, about right there. And I'm going to label it point C. So this was our first kind of round of examples with locating positive rational numbers. Let's go to the next example with locating positive rational numbers. We have point D, E, F, and G that we need to locate on this number line. Make sense of the number line first. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This number line goes on for forever because numbers go on for forever. But do I have any fractional pieces within a whole? No, I don't, but I know roughly where a half would be. I know roughly where a quarter would be. I know where a third would be. So I'm going to use those benchmark fractions, those helpful fractions, to help me plot these. Okay, so I first need to find, for letter D, 6 1/3. Well, here is 6, and if I cut this in my mind, I'm going to put it up here, and you can do it with dotted lines too if you want. If I cut this, thirds tells me I need 3 equal pieces within the whole. 1, 2, 3, right? Now, I have one of them, so I would go to my first one here. That would be 6 1/3. So I would label this D. So my dotted lines here are just representing that I'm trying to estimate, okay, if I cut this whole up into thirds, where would 1/3 be? Let's go to letter E. We have to plot 8 2/3. So here's what thirds looks like within a whole on our number line. 8 2/3. So here would be 8 1/3. Here would be about 8 2/3. And I'll label that point E. I need to find 9 1/2. Really, we're ordering numbers. We're ordering rational numbers. Number lines help us do that. 9 1/2. Well, I know half. Like I could use this up here. 4 to 5, 4 1/2 was literally right in between. I need 2 equal pieces that make up that whole. So 9 1/2 is going to be right in between 9 and 10. I'm going to label that point F. G here, point G, we have 7 4/10. Oh boy. Well, I know any half as a decimal is 0.5 or 50 hundredths or 500 thousandths, right? So if I have 7 and 4/10, 7 and 5/10 represents a half. So if I find 7, here would be 7 and 5/10. 7 and 4/10 is just a little less than that, so it's going to be a little before half. And I'm going to label that G. Before we move to the next chunk, let's add this. Remind ourselves to use friendly fractions to estimate where a value goes on a number line. For example, a half, a third, a fourth, those are friendly fractions. We want to be able to see those fractional parts in our head, be able to visualize them on a number line when our number line is just showing whole numbers. Go ahead and write that on the left-hand side. We're now going to go to the next chunk, so if you need to pause the video because you're not done writing, please do that at any time. Let's start. This is the new part for us, locating negative rational numbers. Is it going to be much different than what we just did? No, but remember we have to switch our thinking. When we are working to the left of 0, numbers are decreasing in value as we move to the left. Remember, -1 has a higher value than -2. -1.5 is not going to be right here. That's going to be -1/2. -1.5 is right here. So it's almost like you're going to be moving left when your brain feels like you're going to want to be moving right because you're so used to working with positive rational numbers. Let's make sense of our number line first. We have 0, there's a tick mark, -1, tick mark, -2. So if I pick a hole, just focus on any hole, and I can see that it's cut up into equal pieces. How many equal pieces? 1, 2. That means this tick mark right here represents -1/2. So if I have to find -2 and 1/4, I'm going to find -2, and now here was -2.5, right? Because my hole is cut up into halves. Quarters, if you think about this, 2/4 is the same as 1/2. Or I'm thinking about this hole right here, I need to cut it up into 4 equal pieces. So there would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So -2 and 1/4 is about right there. I'm going to label that point A. Our next one we have to locate is -7.5. If you're not comfortable looking at this, change it into a mixed number. Or my number line is cut up into halves. Find the 7th one. So right here we would have -1/2, -1.5, or -2 halves, -3 halves, -4 halves, -5 halves, -6 halves, -7 halves. Right? Right there, it's going to be right on that tick mark. Or change it into a mixed number, you'll see it's -3 and 1/2. Here's -3. Remember, we're not going to the right. -3.5 is going to be to the left. It's more negative than -3. And we're going to label it point B. Point C, we have -4 and 75/100. So I know I'm going to be right here, -4. And then I have 75/100 more. So I'm going to be moving to the left. I'm not going to be moving to the right. Our brain wants to think that, but we have to think opposite. Okay, it's more negative than -4. Here's -4.5. Now, if you were to think about this, 3/4, right? 3/4 is the same as 75/100. So if I were to cut this up into fourths again, 1, 2, 3, 3/4 would be about right there. Or you could go, well, this is -4.5. Half as a decimal is 0.5. I'm looking for 0.75. Well, that's going to be less than -4.5, right? So it's going to be to the left of that tick mark there. I'm going to label that point C. Let's go to our next number line. Making sense of the number line first, find a hole. How many equal pieces is that hole cut up into? 1, 2, 3. I need to plot, so that means each one of these tick marks represents a third. So this would be -1/3, -2/3, -1. I need to plot -4 and 1/3. So I'm going to find -4. This is not -4 and 1/3, right? -4 and 1/3 is right here. I'm going to put point D. Being mindful, we have to switch our thinking. We're so used to going to the right. We have to make sure, though, that we're moving to the left when we're dealing with those negatives, okay? Our next point is -2.5, -2 and 5/10. Here's -2. Now, if you think about -2 to -3, this is a hole. I need to cut that into 2 equal pieces. If you kind of think, it would be right there. So I'm not going to put a tick mark, but I'm going to say that -2.5 is about right there. Right? Because this would be 1, 2 pieces, giving me that denominator of 2, which 5/10 is the same as a half. We're going to label that point E. Point F, we have to find -2/3. So here's 0, here's -1/3, here's -1/2. 2/3. So I'm going to label that point F. Using our benchmark fractions of 1/2, 1/4, 1/3 to help us locate rational numbers on a number line. One more number line. Here we go. Make sense of the number line first. Our number line is just showing integers here, right? But we know that there are rational numbers within our integers. So we need to find -7.5. Here's -7. -7.5 would not be this way. If it was +7.5, then it would be right there. But this is -7.5. So I need to move to the left. And 1/2 means I have to create 2 equal spaces in between this hole. So about right there would be -7.5. And we're going to label that point A. Point B, we have to locate at -5 and 2/3. So if I find -5, remember, I'm not going to go to the right to find -5 and 2/3. I need to go to the left. And look, you know that because there's -6. Here would be -4. And that wouldn't work, would it? So -5 and 2/3, I have to think about this hole right here. I have to cut it up into 3 equal pieces. So -2/3 or -5 and 2/3 would be about right there. I'm going to label that point B. We're using those benchmark fractions to help us locate rational numbers on a number line. Point C, we have -2 and 1/4. So I'm going to find -2. I'm going to take this hole right here. I'm going to cut it up into 4. So 4 equal pieces in my mind. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I need 1/4. So -2 and 1/4 is right there. Remember, switch your thinking. Your brain kind of naturally wants to go right when we're doing this, but these are negatives, so we need to be working to the left. And our last one here is -9 and 9/10, which if you think about -9 and 5/10, that's halfway. 5/10 is 1/2. So here's -9. Here would be about -9.5 or -9 and 5/10. I have -9 and 9/10. That's super close to almost another whole, right? 9/10 is super close to 10/10. So that's going to be really close to 10 right there. And I'm going to label that point D. All right, today we worked on locating rational numbers on a number line. And the big thing here, just like in our previous lesson, we got to change the way we're thinking about negatives. Remember, as we move further left on the number line, our values decrease. And as we move further right, they increase. And remembering right here, like -3.5 is not going to be to the right of -3. It's going to be to the left of -3. So just switching our thinking. We're so used to working in positive land, and really in 7th grade, we're working more in negative land. Have a wonderful rest of your day.